Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to one of our Belmas lunchtime sessions. This particular session came about because we were having a conversation, four of us who are on the group today, and it was an incredibly organic, incredibly worthwhile conversation. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we did this as a Belmas lunchtime session? We thought what we needed was a principal's input. So we're delighted today to be joined by Todd Cantrell, who's a principal over in the US. And Todd is actually going to start this afternoon's session off with a quote, as he does in his school. So he'll explain that to you. Then we're going to go round and introduce each other individually. And then we're going to explain the project and the backdrop and what drew us together and have a conversation from there. So welcome, everybody. Todd, over to you.
All right, thank you. So my name is Todd Cantrell. I've spent the last 27 years in education, the last 20 as a high school assistant principal at Central Bucks High School West in Doylestown, PA, USA. CB West is a very high-achieving suburban upper middle class high school. Enrollment is approximately 1,500 students, grades 10 through 12. We're one of three high schools in our district. We're the third largest district in the state of Pennsylvania. My role as assistant principal is I'm directly responsible for a cohort one grade level of students that I see all the way through graduation. That includes their discipline, their attendance, monitoring their grades. I'm also in charge of the physical building of CB West, in charge of all the safety and security protocols, and the evaluation of about 30 staff in my building, and I'm also the master schedule builder. I've been practicing mindfulness since 2011 and teaching mindfulness-based intervention since about 2012. I've known and been working with Dr. Sebrina Doyle Fosco for a number of years, and most recently training to be a care facilitator, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later. At West, we have what's called Lunch and Learn. It's a 66-minute lunch period where students can seek enrichment and remediation during that time, eat their lunch, recreate. They can play basketball, ping pong, walk around, talk with friends. But to end Lunch and Learn, I always end with either a quote or a poem or an anecdote, something to kind of recenter them back to coming back to learning and start heading back to class. I was asked to share kind of an example of that. And one of my favorites is a quote by Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I thought this quote related directly to what we're going to talk about today in many ways. In my 20 years as an educational leadership and administration, cultivating the capacity to respond consciously rather than automatically through mindfulness practices has made the most significant difference in how I lead, how I show up for the people I lead each day, and for the others in my life. And very importantly, for something that's unfortunately neglected by most educational leaders, our own well-being. And so with that, I look forward to our conversation today, and I'll turn it over to Sebrina.
Thanks, Todd. And I've been very fortunate to have Todd as a collaborator on some of the research that I've been working on. So my name is Sebrina Doyle Fosco. I'm an assistant professor in human development and family studies at Penn State University. I'm really excited to be here talking with you all today. I'm very passionate about specifically working with the adults who are in the school building. So as I think about well-being and growing well-being in educational environments, we definitely want it for the kids, but I think the only way we are able to provide that for the kids is if we are showing up for the adults who are there every day caring for others. So I'll be talking a little bit today about a program called Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education. This is a professional development program that's been used for since about 2007 and was recently adapted specifically for educational leaders. So I had the great fortune in October of this last year to be able to go over to the UK, and that was when I was able to meet Claire and Maggie, and even got to have tea with Maggie in person, which was lovely. And was just fascinated to find out that they are doing very similar work to what I'm doing in the US. So it's very excited to be able to come here today to talk together with them. So Maggie, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you.
You're on mute, Maggie.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Sebrina. And also thanks to Todd. I think that quote really does sum up a lot of the work we do, which is around enabling leaders to see that they do have a choice. And the art of leadership is always pivoting to the more responsive choice rather than reacting out of habit, overwhelm, and all the reasons why we know we do sometimes react. So I love that quote, Todd. Thank you for sharing it. So I'm Maggie Farrar. I've been a mindfulness practitioner since my early 30s. I've been 45 years in education, schools, local authorities, and was at the National College for School Leadership, which probably most of you here far too young to have to remember. But it was there that I began to realise that much of our leadership development for school principals was focused on the outer world of leading. Very important, but nowhere near sufficient. And so my work since then has been focused on supporting leaders to explore and cultivate a very strong inner world. And much of that comes through the practice of mindfulness, understanding yourselves better in order that you can be wholly authentic and fully there for yourself and for others. So I'm really looking forward to this. We'll talk in a moment about context, but I think I just want to say here that after those 45 years in education, I have never known it so difficult and so challenging to be a school principal. It's harder, I think, than it's ever been. And I think that the work that we're doing and that many are doing around the world, and it'd be interesting to hear from people on this Zoom, your experience of this sort of inner work is absolutely essential in sustaining leaders in our schools for many, many years and ensuring that they continue to find joy and satisfaction in the work. So I'll toss to Claire.
Thanks, Maggie. So I'm Claire. I was in education for about 25 years. Well, kind of formal education as a teacher and a senior leader for about 20 years. And then made a move to working with schools, but through an organization called the Mindfulness in Schools Project, where we explore programs for teachers and senior leaders and for children aged from 4 all the way through to 18. And then I moved on to the Oxford Mindfulness Foundation, which is a charity that works in collaboration with the University of Oxford. And we co-develop and co-research mindfulness-based programs across a broad spectrum of contexts. What we haven't done until relatively recently is look more explicitly at education. And my passion, as with everybody here, I think, is to support those who are in a leadership position within educational contexts. Because as educational leaders, we're really good at telling all of our colleagues just how important it is to take care of themselves and go and train in this and go and train in that. And actually, very often we're the very last people we take care of. And like Maggie, we've been working together, had the joy of working with Maggie for several years now, actually, on a program which looks at how to support people in leadership and education, not as a sticking plaster, but as both a support for the challenges, but also exploring the opportunities that are out there, and a sustainable program that isn't about relaxing or emptying the mind or never being stressed ever again, but is very much around the practical challenges and opportunities as an educational leader. So I'm really excited to be here and can't wait to join in this conversation. So thank you. Do we need to introduce anybody else? Or are we done? I think we're there, aren't we? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're done. So I think Sebrina's going to start with some detail about the project.
Yeah,
Great.
well, we were just going to think we were going to kick off beginning just by talking about some of the challenges that we're seeing for educational leaders, both here in the US and in the UK, and frankly, in conversation with many of my colleagues from around the world, and I know that other people have probably had similar experiences. This isn't a local problem. This is something that's universal. So, and Todd, Claire, Maggie, you're welcome to jump in whenever you'd like, but I'll just kind of start off and say, one of the reasons why I got really interested in doing this work, really had to do with seeing the not just the emotional problems. We talk a lot about things like burnout, and people leaving the profession, which I think is really important to have a conversation about. But there's something else, especially with educational leadership, that really drew me in and um, motivated me to do this work. And that's specifically the fact that many of the educational leaders are in midlife. And this is where my work, especially in human development, really comes into play. As we think about midlife, it's really a time of change. It's a time of a lot of things to balance with potentially having kids that you're taking care of, maybe aging parents that you're taking care of, and also a lot more physical health challenges than we've had in the past. Ability to bounce back from, extremely long shifts taken over several days just is not the same as when we were in our 20s. And so that's one of the things that has been a real passion that I've been thinking about. It's just some of the real need to take care of our well-being, not just so we can continue to do our jobs, but so we can continue to live well. Maggie or Todd, Claire, any thoughts around that?
Shall I come in just to reflect and then pass over? Yeah, Sebrina, I love that notion of not just to lead well, but to live well. And I think that really does start to resonate in these programs. I think in terms of context, be interested to know from people here whether it's the same in terms of what people are grappling with. And from the leaders I work with in the UK, there are just 4 or 5 things that seem to be just overwhelming at the moment. One is the degree of accountability that they hold. The other is the increased needs of children, mental health needs in particular, special educational needs and disability, in an education system that has no money, has no money to meet these needs. So there's a sense among the leaders of moral dissonance is how I would describe it. They know what they want to do. We know what we want to do in order to help the children in our care, but it seems to be increasingly difficult to do that. And that has significant impact on their feelings of empowerment. They begin to suffer from self-doubt in terms of their ability to do the job. That's compounded by a massive rise in parental complaints. I've seen a number of these complaints. They're all written by AI and social media and so on. So this climate of overwhelm, what I call anticipatory worry, constantly worrying about that which has not yet happened, constantly stressing about that which is not yet stressful, setting themselves impossibly high expectations that they would never set for anybody else. And as a result, just being entrapped in this cycle of busyness, unable to slow down. And I did a survey before COVID, when I was working with a very large multi-academy trust in England of about 60 schools, and we ran a series of residentials. And what came through the their self-assessment was just how chronically sleep deprived they were, waking up at 3 a.m., not being able to get back to sleep. So I hate to call it a crisis, but I do think that currently what's offered to leaders to support them goes nowhere near to even touching the edges of some of that context. But I think we believe that the approach we're taking, challenging though it might be for many leaders, because it is, does start to touch those edges. Claire.
Actually, I was going to invite Todd to come in here because, you're there on the ground doing this work. And I'm just wondering if any of this resonates or whether actually we're missing the point altogether. What's your experience, Todd?
No, I think it's very spot on. It's one of the things I think all of this is very true. We're on high alert all the time, which we know, our nervous systems are beginning to fry. And how do you put in kind of those universal prevention systems to, a lot of the physical maladies? I mean, I've GI issues in administration are one of those things that kind of the unspoken about things, the illnesses, people having to go on leave and things of that nature. And I think the difficult thing is in leadership is that not to say that we're adrenaline junkies, but the things that are detrimental to us are also what are draw us to want to be in these positions as well. I mean, and so there comes this. So if that's kind of like what the job is, and that, and that's what it's attractive about the job and what keeps you kind of going from time to time, like how do you then deal with that to reset? And I think that's kind of the missing link. And a lot of it is, yes, that's existing. We know that's part of the job. And I always joke and say I wasn't drafted into the job. I was, I voluntarily took the position. But how do you create that system in your own life to be able to hit reset? Because I've seen too many people and colleagues over the years that just can't. And ultimately, like Thich Nhat Hanh said, that if you lose yourself in service, you become useless to those you serve. And I think that is a key, is that, we continuously try and grind and grind and grind and grind to our own detriment and burn the candle at both ends until it's completely out. And we think it's like a badge of honor to do that. But at the end of the day, when you don't take time for the self, and I think the important piece of it is that you end up being burnt out and then no good for the people you serve. And I think that's a very hard thing for us as in leadership positions to kind of admit.
And if I can just jump in here, I think that's one of the things. And Claire and Maggie, I know you'll be able to talk a little bit about the programs that you all are running. But I'll just say that this was one of the issues that one of the reasons why I made some adaptations to this program, Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education. This is the program that is being used, or one of the programs that is being used here in the U.S. to address some of these issues for leaders. One of the really important pieces of this is talking about the idea of balancing our well-being. What Todd was talking about, that kind of drive to help people, that thing that gets you up in the morning and keeps you going, that's often related to kind of a eudaimonic well-being, a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. But at the same time, if that is the main thing that you're pursuing, that's the way that you're kind of engaging with feeling a sense of well-being, it can actually cause challenges if you're not also balancing that with your physical well-being, with your social well-being, so your connections with others, your ability to be with your family and your friends. If one thing is too heavily weighted in terms of your well-being, then it can cause more challenges in terms of being able to do the work on a prolonged basis. So Claire, I'm not sure. I wanted to jump in there, but I'm not sure if you have more that you wanted to say about just in general about this work, about the work that you all are doing or otherwise.
Yeah. Well, maybe Maggie and I can share a little bit about the program we're working on, but I just wanted to kind of acknowledge both what Todd was talking about and you, Sebrina, as well, which is that, if you are on the treadmill, and we've all been there, and probably most of us probably still are to a certain extent, the how we hop off it and why is really important. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that the work we do is not about stopping, pausing, being calm, having a lovely time. It's how to navigate the ups and downs of everyday experience as both leaders in education and as human beings and parents and caregivers and so on. And it's really hard because, like any habits, or any addiction, actually, like Todd was saying, your adrenaline junkies potentially. The how, but also the why is kind of understandable. Yes, I'm hurting, I'm exhausted, I can't sleep. But the how often feels way too challenging. What, I've got to give up some time to practice something, or I bet they're going to ask me to do, sit down and stay still for half an hour, and just to say that isn't necessarily an inevitable part of what we do. But what we are working on is rewiring these habits, rewiring our natural reactivity, creating that space, that choice that Todd mentioned in the Viktor Frankl quote. So a lot of this is about choices and noticing when we have them and how to navigate them. I think that's just a very simplified version of what we're doing. I don't know if you agree with that, Maggie, or you want anything else to add. You're on mute again.
No, I think there is a real theme emerging here, isn't there, in terms of the context and why we need to take responsibility, really, ourselves for addressing this, and then the how of how we might go about that. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I would just say that my practice over the time I've been in education has kept my feet on the ground and my head above water over and over and over again. And I genuinely do not think I would be here on this screen if I hadn't practiced. So it's critically important and becoming more important. So Sebrina, shall we hear about care, and then Claire, perhaps you lead off about the OMF program, and I can chip in, and Todd, who are facilitator for care, obviously, to come in as well. Then we'll open up for conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Maggie. So just to tell you a little bit more, as I said before, the CARE program has actually existed since 2007. We have a lot of research that we've done over time, specifically with most of that research has been done with teachers. And so CARE has three core components. The first one is mindful stress management, just kind of what we've been talking about, where we actually take time to stop and practice. Two different kinds of practices, really. The first one is these kind of in the moment practices that really help with things like autonomic nervous system regulation. So that would be things like taking 3 long, slow, deep breaths, or perhaps doing a quick body scan during the day, where maybe you can notice where in your body you're holding stress and let a little bit of that go so we don't do damage to our bodies during the day, which we really can do if we're not aware of what's happening. And then we also do some longer stress management practices that really help kind of anchor the focus and anchor and help you find kind of more of a sense of calm sometimes. But really, it's about practicing this idea of mindfulness, which is, and we haven't, I'm realizing, necessarily given a description of exactly what that is. I can say the definition that we use in the CARE program comes from John Kabat-Zinn, and that's really paying attention in a particular way, which is in the present moment, so right now, intentionally and without judgment. So really not necessarily meaning that you don't have any judgment at all, but rather that you are able to notice judgments when you have it and be curious about what's happening in your body, in your mind, and in your life. So in addition to these mindful stress management practices, we also teach emotion skills instruction. So really thinking about ways we can become more emotionally aware, not just of what's happening in our minds, like what emotions we're thinking about, but where those show up in our bodies, so we can have a better understanding of what's happening. We also talk about emotion regulation as well. And then finally, the third kind of core component is caring and compassion practices. So these are things like how we basically take these internal, we talk about mindfulness as something that might be within ourselves, but it can be interpersonal too. It can come into our social relationships through things like mindful listening, being able to really attend with that focused awareness to what another person is saying without doing what a lot of us do, which is spend the time trying to think about what it is that we need to say in response, how to solve their problem. We often talk in care about the fact that we can do all of those active listening things like, making eye contact and leaning in and nodding and giving all those visual cues that we're listening while at the same time as we're making our grocery list. So really being able to attend to these kind of caring and compassion practices. And of course, all of this is held in a container where we do this, we practice with other people. So there's a lot that we learn by sitting in community. And that's one of the offerings that we have with the CARE program is really sitting in community. And we're actually, Todd and I are going to be doing this later on today. We have follow-on sessions where we're able to talk further with people about their development. So I will say that our program is a 12-hour program, and it is typically done over the course of a couple of days. I know, I think Claire and Maggie are going to be talking to you about a program with a different structure. One of the things that's really interesting is how we are actually engaging in this. So that's kind of the basis of the CARE program. Todd, did I miss anything? Do you have anything else that you want to talk about with this?
I don't think it missed, but maybe just to like illuminate some of the things I think, from the world of day-to-day administration that are really, really poignant in the program. Or I think we look at being an administrator oftentimes is a very lonely job. And it's really nice to know that, the emotions and feelings that you're having, the day-to-day struggles, that you're not alone, and going really highlighting the community aspect that it, through that kind of shared vulnerability in that group during those sessions. I find time and time again at our administrative meetings, participants in those will email me or stop up and just say a few words about those things. And a lot of it that I've found over time through practices and with CARE as well, because it's a direct thing, is the communication piece, the listening aspect of things. So much in our jobs, we're problem solvers, and we jump to solving everything, which so often creates more problems than if we just kind of listened intently and we're actually present with what was happening and what someone was saying. Oftentimes we're the complaint department. So sometimes people just want to complain. They don't need an answer. And when you start throwing answers, then you start creating more problems. So the communication aspect, I don't know who said it, and it's probably paraphrasing, but the biggest problem with communication is that people think it happened. And I think that this program really does a phenomenal job of, in some ways, uncomfortably, when you learn to just listen, can be very, very uncomfortable. So I just wanted to highlight those couple of pieces in the program.
Thanks, Todd. And I'll just say, so this program is actively, we're actively engaged in research right now to look at some of the outcomes from this program for educational leaders. Again, we've had a wealth of research done on the CARE program for teachers, and we've seen changes not only like interpersonal changes for teachers, meaning less emotional exhaustion, changes in in mental health, things like that. But we also see changes downstream for teachers in their classrooms and also for their students. So there's good reason to believe that when we support leaders, that we can see changes not only in their personal well-being, but also downstream in their schools and in their educational communities. So, and I'm always happy to talk more about that, but I'm going to turn it over to Claire and Maggie so they can talk about what's happening at OMF.
Thanks, Claude and Sebrina. I'll just give an overview, if that's okay, and then I'll invite Maggie to come in with anything that she wants to also mention. What's lovely to hear in you describing your program, Sebrina, is just the commonality of themes, and they come from a a long heritage of kind of understanding the human mind and our delights as a species and also our challenges. So lots of themes we're also building into what we do, but mainly our approach is based on what's known as MBCT, which is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which is an evidence-based program that was first developed to support people who experience depression and anxiety. And it's now available in the UK. It's on the National Health Service, actually. But this is very much a program. This program, our Leading with Presence program, is aimed at people who are just navigating life's everyday ups and downs. But each session we have builds on the skills developed from the previous session. So ours is more intensive in that we offer 8 2-hour sessions. So one session a week, each is 2 hours. The first half, the first hour, explores a theme, a common human theme, but then specifically within the context of the challenges and opportunities an educational leader will be experiencing based on our experience, the experiences of educational leaders we've spoken to, worked with. So it will be things like how can you listen and be fully present when you're having a conversation? How can you support yourself in challenging moments? How can you notice pleasant or things that it's possible to appreciate, because we have a negativity bias as a species, and we will always be drawn by the things that are difficult or challenging. And what we learn early on in our program is about attention, which is a fundamental part of learning any mindfulness-based skill. That we have this thing called attention, that it tends to be focused. And so wherever we focus our attention, that is our experience in that moment. And if we've got a negativity bias, most of our experience on a day-to-day basis is going to be that is challenging and difficult. So we learn to develop the skill of broadening awareness so that we can notice other things as well, get a sense of balance. The first half of each session, as I say, is taking a key theme, but very carefully tuned towards the experience of educational leaders. And the second half of each session is then a discussion, basically. How will this work for you? In what kind of situations might this support you? So it's a dialogue, not just delivering learning. And the idea is, as we go along, we also start to experiment with what it would be like for these leaders to bring a little bit of their learning into their context. So having the opportunity, for example, to start a staff meeting in a more kind of present way, and they get careful support in how they do that and ways in which not to do that as well. Because one of the things we learn quite quickly when we've been learning and practicing mindfulness is it's easy to get or sound evangelical. And this isn't about selling something. It's just about sharing and exploring some ideas. Yeah. So Maggie, anything you want to add to that? You're on mute again.
I've even put a post-it down here saying, don't forget to unmute. So thank you. I think we're all sharing some common practices that have been around for millennia. And it's just lovely to hear. And we know how powerful they can be when they are practiced. And I think I'd just like to add a couple of things, Claire. First is that there's something about this work when leaders come to it. It's deeply human work. It's deeply ethical work. And there's a dawning of, but I always knew this. It's how to be human. But it's always felt just out of reach. Or I'm just so busy I forget. And the not so human, good, compassionate, kind part of myself takes a back seat when it most needs to take the front seat. So it's really fascinating about how leaders come to this. And that's one of its challenges. And we might talk about this because it's not a professional development program like anything else they might have done. It's more a sort of an awakening, a shifting, an unfolding. And as you said, Claire, requires ongoing practice. This is a lifetime's work that we are offering, Sebrina, Todd, Claire and I, as a program because it's kind of all we have to work with within an institutional context. But that in itself, I think, makes it challenging. The word mindfulness is challenging. I know when I started practicing in my 30s and when I became an educational leader, I was really shy about this. I thought people would think I was weird. I thought people would take advantage of me if I was kind and compassionate. So it takes a while to get over that. But for us, I think we weave through what you've just said, Claire, and I just loved listening to that. It brought it all alive for me again. So thank you. That we practice intentionally, as we might say, on the cushion or in the car when you get to work, switch the engine off, 10 minutes practice. So you intentionally practice, ideally at some point every day, to start to build your attentiveness and your attentional muscle and your mindfulness muscle. We also build in, and they talk about this, the way in which these practices can be responsive in the moment when you feel it would be most helpful. And then we also move into enabling practices, sharing this with others, practicing more intentionally and visibly, like before a meeting, after a meeting, meetings with parents when there might be heightened emotion, conversations with children. So I suppose in the work that we're doing, we've got this braided approach, which is around your personal change and how you're becoming more embodied, because our bodies are teachers, barometers, and mentors. But I know I led from the neck up for about 20 years, completely forgot I had a body till it hurt. It hurt. So you change personally, your leadership changes, and the culture of your organization changes. And actually that journey is for us really important, not easy, particularly the last one. But when you begin to see that, so your organization, your school becomes more compassionate, you're building a more compassionate, humane, and healthy education system where everyone can thrive. That's why we do the work. But it is a lifetime's practice, which for some people, for me, for Claire, for us, is hard. But the reasons why we do it are ethical and important. I wanted to say that, Claire.
Maggie, you were mentioning earlier on about the way in which, and I don't know, Todd, if you've experienced this as well. I'm guessing you have, but it would be interesting to hear from you too. But you mentioned earlier on, Maggie, that principals, head teachers in our English context, and indeed many others, are noticing this huge drive and increase in complaints that are all AI generated. And I wonder, given the sort of age, Anthropocene, we find ourselves kind of leading in, I wonder if there's more of a need than ever for us to respond humanly to the way in which the rise of the technology is kind of increasing, changing the nature of the workload, which has always been difficult, always been stressful. But now, you mentioned accountability right at the start in the English context. Now, for some leaders that I meet, almost seems, too much so. And with those demands that you were talking about, Sebrina, of being midlife, we know it often drives people out, right? We know it fuels our recruitment retention crisis. And Todd, I'm guessing you've seen or experienced similar things.
Todd, do you want to go?
Sure. I don't know about the AI component of things. The retention of things, absolutely. I think it's almost daily. I'm told at least 3 times I wouldn't want your job. And part of it's kind of like a badge of honor. But the other component of it is too, like, they're not lying. But I think overall, I would say more than AI is the social media aspect of things is really what has made our job that much more difficult over, even from when I started, probably the last 10 years that, these different things that the comparison is the thief of joy, and these kids are trying to live up to expectations that are absolutely made up, and maybe that's the AI piece, that some of these things that are created out there are that some influencer creates, and this is what they're trying to do. And then I think misinformation that's there in terms of moving on to colleges and universities and these pressures that are they're placing on themselves, and then you being the one that has to try and navigate that I feel that more and more our job really is just managing expectations of all the stakeholders. So yes, and becomes daunting.
Yeah, that's yeah, so well explained, Todd. And I think what mindfulness does is it helps leaders to cultivate perspective. So that this was just last week, actually. I was working on with a good colleague, a program called Inside Out Leadership, and one of the leaders said, she got a complaint. It was clearly AI. We'd be doing a lot of work on perspective, and she just did that momentary, noticing her body. Oh, I am triggered by a robot here, by this complaint. What's going on? Feeling in her body, and knowing she had a choice, and pivoted from responding in a way which might sound equally robotic and bring in a power dimension, and instead she pivoted to relational relationships. You said, Deb, she phoned the parent and said, come in and let's have a coffee. Now it takes more time, but if she hadn't noticed that I'm triggered by a robot, this is ridiculous because my body's gone tight and I'm armored, she probably wouldn't have noticed she had a choice to pick up the phone, come in for a coffee. And that gets around the parent body that actually you'll be invited in for a coffee. The head teacher will really invite you to have a chat to understand what's going on and what's going wrong, without the head teacher defending, explaining, justifying, just that open communication. So I think in a world of AI, the notion of relational leadership, which I think flourishes through the practice of mindfulness, is so essential.
Yes, and I think that's just it, Maggie, isn't it? It's about those alternative ways in which we can learn through work like this to be able to respond differently. And I sit on a governing body. I chair a couple of committees on that governing body. And I've noticed just since September, really, the huge rise in our workload in that governing body because of all of these AI generated letters that are coming in that are almost forcing us to respond legally or legalistically, when actually that human dimension would clearly be better.
Oh, Maggie, you're on mute, huh?
I was just going to say, I wonder if we could hear from anybody else who's on the screen.
Yeah. And, I'll say one more thing, and then perhaps maybe we can, I'm wondering if maybe we can bring in the audience at this point, maybe see what other folks might have to say. But I just wanted to highlight one other thing. And I think, Maggie and Claire and Todd and Deb and I, we've all had these conversations, I think, over and over again. And one of the reasons we do this work is not just so we can change individuals, but really it's so we can change these educational systems. When we see people going through programs like this, one of the things that I love seeing is just the curiosity that comes out with folks who begin to think about not only their own experiences, but as they're reflecting on, oh my gosh, this is a moment of awareness for me, they also begin to think about, how do I help other people have that same moment of awareness? And I think that's one of the ways when Maggie was talking about the idea of embodiment of how we become this, but also how by becoming this, we are able to share this out with others. I think that's one of the key features. We're really able to change these systems, as Maggie said, as we change ourselves. So certainly other people on the panel can respond, but I'm wondering if anybody who is out in the audience may want to share a little bit about either their experiences or challenges that they might be experiencing in these roles.
Hello, my name's Steve Willoughby. I'm a have worked for schools for years and years. I've actually just recently retired, although I'm doing quite a lot of research on special educational needs. And this has been a major issue for leaders and TAs as well in schools at the moment, because there is no clear line by the government on special educational needs, and it's making it quite difficult for schools. And so, therefore, listening, I think, is probably the most important thing of all to try and deal with this at a school level, both in terms of senior leaders, but also teachers and TAs. And I think you need to try and be working as a team, and being a team is not always easy. So I think one of the things that I've heard from what you're saying, and I totally agree with most of the points, but I would push a lot more on listening, because it seems to me that half the, we want to solve things. You can't always solve things. At the moment, we haven't even had the white paper on special educational needs from the government in England, and we're still waiting for that. So this special educational needs for me is a big issue, and it's happening in schools in a big way. And I would say that listening to each other and listening carefully is very, very important.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, especially because the other side of the work I do this work with Care for Educational Leaders, and actually, in a part of the Care for Educational Leaders is we do work not just with school leaders. There's a reason why the term is broader, but we also work with, in the U.S., it's district level leaders. I mean, I think it's multi-academy trust, so you have other kind of language to describe. But people who are in, for example, director of special education roles, things like that. And then in addition to that, I have another research project that's happening here in the United States with some other colleagues, specifically focused around teaching these skills to special educators, because they are so valuable. And we are seeing changes as a result of that, specifically with their emotion-focused interactions with kids. We're seeing changes in emotional reappraisal. So there are a lot of, I agree with you, the challenges specifically for special education is really important for us to think about, because that does take up so much resources in our educational institutions. And it's a key source of challenge, like Deb was bringing up, for example, with people becoming legalistic, where it changes the dynamic of the relationship between us and the other person when those legal issues are brought in.
Yes. You'll find that people like Rob Webster has actually just recently, a couple of years ago, a book on that. I mean, I wrote a book recently with a colleague on TAs. Now, what I'm saying really is that without leaders being able to listen very carefully, they're going to have lots of aggravation. And I think it is the listening. Without that, solving, whether you're going to be able to solve it, I don't think so. But listening does a lot to help with the team spirit, and actually you're not feeling low all the time. Anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, Stephen, I think you're absolutely right to raise TAs as well. I think that one of the things that we seem to have lost in education, and again, mindfulness with its emphasis on being grounded and connected to values and core principles and so on, is to help leaders to reclaim their own sense of agency. Because an awful lot of time in education is spent waiting for the government to make a decision, waiting for the policy to come out, waiting for the framework to come out, whilst at the same time the issues that these policies and frameworks are intended to address get more and more complex and significant. And the roots of mindfulness, even secular mindfulness, the roots are in Buddhist philosophy. And one of the things that we can learn to practice in mindfulness is to be to feel grounded in our groundlessness, because we're feeling groundless because nothing's coming from the government on SEN except lots of promises that there will be something coming. So there's a sense of we can't feel the ground beneath our feet. In mindfulness, you do feel the ground beneath your feet, and it makes it more possible for us as principals and leaders to be able to engage with the staff, not to be the one who knows, because we don't, but to be the one who can create a psychologically safe, grounded environment in which we can continue to learn. And I've seen mindfulness over and over again give leaders that sense of, I'll find my own ground and my own agency. I don't have to wait for a government department. So there's lots of ways I see that mindfulness can help us to be with what's happening, however difficult and uncomfortable it might feel, and still in our core be fine and be able to project that to the staff.
Okay.
Yes, and it's great to see, Maggie. Thanks very much for your comment, Regina. There's a good comment in the chat now from Regina, whose camera isn't working today. Totally understand that. We had a session last week from Anna May Rooney, who's not long completed her doctorate in the lived experience, really, of Irish primary school teachers. And Regina is now undertaking a PhD on that, on something similar. And so there's a lot of resonance on today's chat with our Irish principal who's joining us as well. I didn't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just looking at our participant list. And Midori, we do have you with us from Japan. I don't know if you want to say anything about whether or not you've come across anything similar in your Japanese context. It's always lovely to hear from you, Midori.
Hello, and thank you for talking at a chat. Thank you for giving the talking time. And I'm sorry my camera is not good. And so, yes, very interesting today's topics. And because now I'm gonna take a research focus on the well-being in the school in our institute. So your topic and the well-being is very important for the school leaders and also teachers and the children in Japan, but very difficult and situation in Japanese context because teacher workload is very hard condition in Japan. So government wants to reduce the teacher workload, but another side is a lot of new approach for the curriculum and also teaching method. So teachers have a lot of pressure for the professional development and also try to the new scheme to learn a lot of things. And also head teachers have to work too hard to try to the school reform. So a lot of pressure and also a lot of pressure from the outside in parents and also social media and also government, local and also central government. So very difficult conditions. So we have to take research focus on how to reduce these pressures and how to make a good condition for the well-being in schools. So today's topic is very, very, very interesting for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Midori. I want to highlight something just because it's coming up in what you were saying, and I think this is coming up generally. I think I can speak for all of the panelists here today. We are all here wanting to help as much as we can with well-being for the adults who are in the schools, knowing full well that what we really need is more systems change. But while we're waiting for systems change, we all have to have the ability to maintain and to continue moving forward in our own lives and support our own well-being. So it's a both and. We would love to see more systems change to support people more effectively. And at the same time, we really do want to make sure that we are helping people learn whatever, the skills that they need in order to cope in very difficult conditions with a lot of work stress. having to, especially for people who have worked in education for many, many years, I'm sure you can attest to the fact that working in education has never been easy. It is particularly hard right now, but it's never been easy. So being able to manage the stress that comes along with the job is true, even as we wait for these systems to change.
Could I also pop in here, Sebrina, because I completely agree with what you've just said. And I just want to kind of flag up, because we haven't really had a chance to talk about what mindfulness is, or more importantly, what it isn't. But I think often people think this is just something that just makes you feel better. And we've already said some of it can be quite challenging. Some of it's actually very straightforward. But I just wanted to flag up an experience I had I was talking at a conference, and someone came up to me afterwards and was really quite aggressive and said, "I think it's disgusting that you are peddling mindfulness to teachers. We shouldn't be trying to fix ourselves. It's the system that's broken, and we need to change the system." And it was a brilliant opportunity for me to step back and think, yeah, what are we doing here? And then, of course, I realized, well, what does a change in the system need? As Stephen said, it needs listening, deep listening, but it also needs mental space and balance so that you can see the problems clearly and you can see the opportunities clearly. And then going back to good old Viktor Frankl, you then notice if there's a choice. So I think it's really important that whatever challenges we're experiencing, that we learn skills that will allow us to notice the choices that we might have. And I think that can be the most helpful thing you get from these kind of programs. So I'd leave it there. Thank you. I'm aware of time.
I think that's a really interesting comment, though, for me, Claire, because we're 18, 20 months into a change of government, and we've had a curriculum and assessment review and things like that, but we've got tinkering around the edges. We have any fundamental reforms of the system. And this was a Balmas lunchtime session, right? And people will always say to me, "Oh yes, Balmas, you're a registered charity, so you're an aid." I'll say yes. However, that doesn't mean people don't have. Today's discussion has been really interesting.
I think we're losing you, Deb.
Have a more psychological, because this isn't about not wanting the system to change. This has been, and yes, I know we have some Labour government strategies in place to deal with that now, but we've still got a whole generation of children that have through that.
I think we've lost you, Deb.
Today,
gone very glitchy.
Maggie, Sebrina, Todd,
Just want to thank everybody for coming today. It's been lovely. Maggie, Claire, Todd, Deb, as always. Thank you. It's lovely talking with you. And please do, for anyone who is on the call today, feel welcome to reach out to any of us and to get more information or to talk more about these projects.
And we have a few links that go with today's sessions from the people who've taken part. So we'll make sure that all of those links that have been in the chat and have been from our emails go up with the website when the recording goes up as well. So we'll make sure that they're available.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. Lovely to see you all today.